To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com. Happy Thursday, buddy. Glad you're with us. Welcome in. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Chris Canty in for Mike Golic. Trey Wingo is here with you. Chris, how are we?
I'm good, Trey. How's everything with you?
Surviving, brother, surviving. So,
Chris, springtime finally arrived in Bristol, Connecticut.
Yeah, well, you know, we had, it took forever.
Okay.
It took forever, just so you know, and we made it. But we're here.
We're here now.
We're here, and we're celebrating the good times. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests will join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We got a lot to get to, by the way. Chris, of course, former NFL player that played with the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Ravens, won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants. Also a member of ESPN 98.7 New York, ESPN Radio there. So you're double dipping today. You're doing major work.
Yeah, I got 7 hours of radio ahead of me, but I get the chance to work with my guy. We'll actually have Michael Kay in studio.
So it'll be like old home week for you.
Yeah, exactly. 2 guys from the Bronx in the studio can never be a bad thing. We'll get to talk about the Yankees.
And the other thing is we're going to need to set the record straight because Chris was part of the draft, and we had you on before the draft, and you had the honor of announcing the second-round pick of the New York Football Giants. Third round pick of the New York Giants. And there was a little controversy, and I gave you some grief over it. I'm not going to give it away now. But as we did a deeper dive into what happened, it turns out you were set up to fail.
I was set up to fail, but you're my guy, and you threw me under the bus.
I did.
And then you text me later on that night, and you got the full story.
Let me put it this way. Rule number 1, kids, when something happens, take a deep breath, take a deep dive, and then learn about everything that might have gone wrong, and then you'll figure it out eventually.
So essentially the opposite of what the NFL does.
Yes. We got a lot to get into with that. The NFL anthem policy came out, and all they've done is manage to throw gas on a fire that was completely doused, in my opinion. We'll figure it out. We'll try and get through that. We'll get you ahead to Game 5 tonight in the Western Conference Finals, a huge one now as it's back in Houston, tied at 2, and the Rockets see if they can capture on the momentum of what happened in Game 4. Plus, we've got a lot to talk about with what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals last night. We'll get to all of that by starting with what's trending, and now the Celtics are 1 game away from playing in the NBA Finals. They beat the Cavs 96-83 to take a 3-2 series lead. Boston has now won 10 straight home playoff games, tying the NBA record for a single season, Chris.
Well, here's the thing. When you look at last night's game, you knew that the Boston Celtics were going to play better because role players play better at home. And that's why both of these teams have been pretty good at home. The Boston Celtics undefeated this postseason at home. The Cleveland Cavaliers only have 1 loss. So when you saw that the Cleveland Cavaliers were trying to put together little stretches, plays, build momentum in that game, the players for the Boston Celtics, namely Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, and Al Horford, were able to come up with some hustle plays, some impact plays to bring the momentum back in Boston's favor, and ultimately that ended up being a difference. I think the turnovers in the second half really hurt the Cleveland Cavaliers' chances in being able to mount that comeback.
Al Horford played the way he's played through most of this NBA postseason. He hadn't been a dominant figure in this series against the Cavs, but he was great in the first 2 series. Again, he only had 15 points, but he was plus 22 on the night. And we'll get into the LeBron James bashing a little bit later on.
Which is ridiculous, by the way.
Thank you. Listen, LeBron led all the Cavs with 26 points, but put it in perspective. He had 26. The rest of the Cleveland Cavaliers starters had 24 points. And we can have a discussion about fatigue and being tired and disengagement, if you will, which I don't even know. Where's the disengagement-o-meter? I don't know how to register that. Is that a second spectrum stat? I'm not sure. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But again, the Cavs as a team and as a whole came up short, and even Ty Lue admitting he lost his sense of when Kyle Korver could play in this game. And the whole thing.
How does that happen in the NBA Conference Finals?
That is an excellent question. But let's talk more about LeBron's engagement. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the bottom line is now the Celtics are 1 home game away, which they will have in Game 7, and a chance to win in Cleveland in Game 6 of getting back to the NBA Finals. Speaking of getting to the Finals, hey, DC sports fans, when you woke up this morning, This is called optimism. I know it's something you haven't had in a long time, but the Caps finally did it. They advanced to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since 1998 by beating the Lightning 4-0 in Game 7 in Tampa. Alex Ovechkin scored the first goal of the game with just over a minute gone in the first period, the earliest goal to open a playoff game in his career.
Well, here's the thing. If they don't score, they can't win. And Braden Holtby has them back-to-back shutouts in Game 6 and Game 7. That's ultimately the difference, but it's great to see the Caps finally get to the Stanley Cup Finals with Alex Ovechkin. Talking about one of the greatest goal scorers in this era in the National Hockey League, and he'll have a chance of going up against this year's great story, which is the expansion Las Vegas Golden Knights being able to actually get to a Stanley Cup Finals in their first year.
Yeah, if you look at the Final Four teams that were there when it was all said and done, if you're the NHL, if you're being honest with yourself, the idea of the upstart Golden Knights out of Las Vegas, the bright, shiny new toy, and look, this unbelievable story against the team with a superstar from a big market that has never been able to be on this stage, this is kind of the matchup you kind of felt you were hoping for.
No,
right? To drive viewers.
It's exactly what you were hoping for. You just didn't think it was going to be able to happen. But seeing the Washington Capitals finally get over that hump and Alex Ovechkin finally get a chance to play in the Stanley Cup Finals, like that's a great story. And then, of course, the Las Vegas Golden Knights. They needed that to be a success out there, and it absolutely was. I mean, you're talking about a team where the practices are sold out.
Yes.
So that's how big of a deal it is in Las Vegas. So the first professional sports league to move in town actually had success. I know the NFL has got to be loving that because the Los Angeles Raiders, the Oakland Raiders will soon be the Las Vegas Raiders.
Correct.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting is the Caps look like they're exercising some demons. Again, we had these stats going into Game 7. They took a 2-0 series lead. Now, minimum, most NHL teams that do this win those series when you're up 2-0 70% of the time. Going into this series, the Washington Capitals had been 3-5 in franchise history in series in which they had started winning 2-0. They're now 4-5. They finally got it done. And again, they're facing the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Finals beginning Monday in Las Vegas. The Caps actually lost both regular season meetings against Vegas. Ovechkin has 339 more regular season goals in his career than the Golden Knights franchise. That's the largest gap between a player and an opposing team in a Stanley Cup final in NHL history. So as we continue with, we'll get to more things that may have happened while you were sleeping, which is brought to you by Tempur-Pedic. Now you can save up to $700 on select adjustable mattress sets during our Memorial Day sale. Visit TempurPedic.com. Now we move to baseball, and Justin Verlander continues to do amazing things. He allowed 1 run and 3 hits while striking out 9 batters in 6 innings, leading the Astros over the San Francisco Giants 4-1. Verlander has allowed only 11 runs in 11 starts and has surrendered no runs or 1 run in 8 of those innings. Realistically, he could be 11-0 with better run support, but the Astros have been shut out twice when he started and been held to 1 run, two other times. His ERA is a ridiculous 1.08.
Well, you look at that entire staff, top to bottom, all 5 pitchers, they have the best starting ERA in the majors. So when you consider this team being able to fortify a strength, which was starting pitching by being able to acquire Garrett Cole this offseason, it made a really, really good team, the defending World Series champions, that much better. So to me, ultimately, it's going to come down to the Houston Astros, the New York Yankees, and the Boston Red Sox in the American League. And I think for the championship, because the NL, it's just one of those situations where everybody's kind of jumbled up in there. But clearly those 3 teams are the best teams in baseball, and it's hard to bet against the Houston Astros with the starting pitching rotation that they have.
Listen, that rotation is built for postseason. There's no doubt about it. And they've got plenty of firepower as well. Now, the Yankees are destroying people with their bats and getting enough pitching right now.
Didn't work out last night, though.
It did not work out last night. But just for reference, okay, that ERA of 1.08. Here are the best first-half ERAs since 1933. That was when the All-Star Game debuted. This is per Baseball Reference. Number 1, Bob Gibson of the Cardinals in that great 68 season, 1.05. Verlander right now is number 2 at 1.08. Bob Nepper of the Astros, 1.15. Louis Tiant of the Indians in 1968, 1.24. I'll always think of Louis Tiant with the Yankees. Doing commercials for Yankee Franks. It's great to be with a wiener, is what he would say. And then, of course, we all remember Red Munger. We all remember. You have a Red Munger baseball card, right? Yes, old man. Red Munger, 1944. The Cardinals had a 1.34 ERA. Hashtag, let's bring back red. Staying in baseball, the Angels rallied from a 3-1 hole in the 9th inning to beat the Blue Jays 5-4, and our guy, Shohei Ohtani,
I want you to Shohei the way.
Did it again. Hit a game-tying 2-run single, which was followed by a 2-run single by Simmons to put Anaheim in front.
Just looking at what he's been able to do, not only, as a pitcher, which we all knew he had the talent, but now at the plate and being as dominant as he is, being an accomplished hitter in this situation, somebody that they can turn to be their DH. It's really impressive to see Shohei Ohtani come and have the success that he's had in the regular season, especially after the spring training that we saw, because it looked like a disaster. Yeah. It looked like a train wreck waiting to happen, but apparently he turns it on when the regular season comes and the games actually mean something. So I'm really impressed by what he's been able to do and where this Angels team is at right now.
There are a lot of hot takes coming out of spring training that people were bashing Shohei Ohtani. And, oh, thank goodness he didn't come to our team. I think they'd all like to have those thought bubbles back and shove them back in their mouths right now.
Just a little bit.
Because it has been the exact opposite of what we thought, to your point, especially on the mound, what we saw from Shohei Ohtani in spring training. And then we're in this sweet spot right now in the NBA playoffs where we get a great game every night, which is just fantastic. Western Conference Finals tied at 2. Warriors face the Rockets in Houston tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio. And again, every playoff game in the NBA throughout the finals will be heard on ESPN Radio. Golden State looks to avoid back-to-back postseason losses for the first time since the 2016 NBA Finals, when, as we all know, they were up 3-1 on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cavs came back to win that series in 7.
Yeah, and the Draymond Green suspension didn't help in that series, but if you look at the Golden State Warriors in Game 4, I thought that was more about the Golden State Warriors losing that game than it was the Houston Rockets winning that game.
Hot take!
In Game 2, you could say, the Houston Rockets, they took that one from the Golden State Warriors at the Toyota Center. And how often are P.J. Tucker and Eric Gordon going to go 11 from 15 from three-point range? But those players were able to make the plays in those critical moments to win. To me, this was more about the Golden State Warriors not making the plays that they needed to down the stretch on the offensive side of the court. Defensively, they got the stops. Right. In the last 2 minutes, the last 4 possessions that Houston had, they weren't able to come up with anything. But on the following possessions for the Golden State Warriors, they only came up with a combined 3 points. Yep. And they fell in love with isolation ball, guys taking bad shots, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry. They've been better on the offensive end because they share the basketball. And so what we saw down the stretch for the Golden State Warriors was a little bit uncharacteristic. And Steve Kerr, not sure why you didn't call a timeout when Draymond Green got the rebound with 11 seconds left to try to put together a set play on the inbounds. But you probably might want to think about that.
Yeah, you're good.
You, that guy.
You're good, by the way. Breaking that
Steve
down.
Steve Kerr's good, but he wasn't good in that moment.
No, he was not. As for how important Game 5 can be when you're tied at 2, the series goes to the winner of Game 5 about 83% of the time. That's how critical that is. And, of course, that also leads us back to what we started what's trending with, which is the Eastern Conference Finals and the Cavs, not LeBron James. The Cavs not finding a way to win Game 5. It is amazing to me, and we'll get into this, how whenever Cleveland loses, it's LeBron James's fault. And whenever they win, it's always LeBron James that wins. We don't look at the Cleveland Cavaliers in any way, shape, or form like we look at any other team. Golic and Wingo, presented by Progressive Insurance. Small business protection just got easier. With more than 30 coverage options available, Progressive has you covered. More at progressivecommercial.com. And it would be very progressive thinking if people would look at the Cleveland Cavaliers as a whole and not just this entity of LeBron James. Because LeBron James was 11 of 22 shooting. He made 3 or 4 free throws. He had 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 26 points. And again, put it in perspective, he had 26 points. The rest of the starters combined had 24 points. That is not a recipe for success. Yet after the game, everybody's talking about something to do with LeBron James and his fault and his interest level, his engagement level. And our guy, Tim Legler, even went here. Biorhythms.
I made a note 5 minutes into the game. It's one of the first notes I wrote down tonight was, why is LeBron grabbing his shorts and bending over on a free throw attempt 5-6 minutes into the game? It just didn't look right. They're going to feed off of this guy's energy level. Sure. He's been sensational. Obviously, what he has done in the postseason is almost superhuman. But tonight, for whatever reason, he just didn't have it. His biorhythms were not working for him tonight.
Okay, so we got biorhythms, right? Biorhythms, okay?
Now Greg's going all sports science on us.
Yeah, now let's listen to Freddie Coleman from Freddie and Fitzsimmons. So we got biorhythms covered. Now let's see if we can have some other abstract things that might be covered in talking about LeBron James.
It's inexcusable how Cleveland can come out and play like that. And I'm placing this at the feet of LeBron James and Tyronn Lue. LeBron James had those fantasy basketball numbers, 26 points. He had 10 rebounds. He had 5 assists. He didn't look engaged at all in this game. And that clearly was able to transfer it to everybody else on this basketball team, where if you win this game 5, like I said, Boston would be done. They've only won one playoff game on the road this postseason. You would have taken care of your business and gone to the NBA Finals. Instead, if you wanted a game 7, fine. But there's a better way to go about that if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Okay, so we've got biorhythms and engagement. Now, let me just ask you a question. Okay, when you hear those things in discussing why the Cleveland Cavaliers lost, what is your reaction?
My reaction is that LeBron James, being the best player in the world, can't carry this supporting cast when it comes to being able to win on the road against the best defensive team in all of the NBA.
How dare you make sense, Chris Canty? How dare you look at things logically? How dare you understand the reality of the situation and not fall into, I love Freddie. Don't get me wrong. He talked about fantasy numbers. No, 26 points, 10 boards. Those aren't fantasy numbers. Those are actual things that happened. Biorhythms and disengagement, that's fantasy.
Well, here's the thing. We look at it differently with LeBron James because he is the best player in the world, and no player has more influence on his team and really all of the NBA than LeBron James. So in terms of being able to be held accountable for his team's performance, you can understand that because he's the one that's supposed to set the tone. He's the leader of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And to see the lack of effort from the other guys, the supporting cast, especially on the offensive end, it's just one of those things that's disappointing. But this is when you miss a player like Kyrie Irving.
Thank you.
This is when you have to have somebody other than LeBron James that can create on the offensive end, and you really don't have that difference maker. I understand that Kevin Love is an all-star, but he's not a guy that can create for other players in and of himself. So I think that when you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers team, I think that it's built for LeBron James to be able to distribute the basketball, but when the opposing team's defense makes it tough on him, then it's hard for those other guys to get going. Remember what Brad Stevens said earlier in this series. He said, you can't stop LeBron James, but our goal as a team is to make it as hard on him as possible for as long as possible. And that's exactly what they've done throughout this series, especially at home in TD Garden.
Yes, and again, people, why didn't the Cavs take care of business? Well, wait a minute. You know who took care of business? The Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
The Boston Celtics took care of business because they have yet to lose at home.
Yeah.
And we had Jackie McMullen, a great NBA writer and analyst, on with us earlier, and basically she said it. Look, this Celtics team is about 3D, hitting three-pointers and playing good defense. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did last night against Cleveland. Now, I'm not going to excuse 6 turnovers for LeBron James. That can't happen. As a team, they had 15. That can't happen. As a team, the Celtics only had 8. But I don't quite understand this prism, how we look at this series where it's either LeBron is doing everything or LeBron is doing nothing. We don't even talk about everybody else on the Cleveland Cavs that hasn't contributed anything in a lot of these losses, and we seem to gloss over the idea that, oh, by the way, the Celtics have the better team, they probably have the better head coach, and they were playing at home. That matters here. All of that matters more than biorhythms and disengagement.
Well, we're hyper-focused on LeBron because he's the only star in this series, and we haven't seen LeBron James struggle to come out of the East like this in a really long time. So I think that's why everybody is trying to figure out what's going on with LeBron James. But you got to give credit where credit is due. The Boston Celtics are a good team. Now, maybe the individual parts aren't as good man for man as the Cavaliers, but collectively, the sum of what the Boston Celtics are bringing to the table is better than the Cleveland Cavaliers. And ultimately, that ends up being the difference. Bill Parcells used to say this all the time. The best players don't always make the best teams, but the best teams always win.
Yes.
And that's why the Boston Celtics are ahead in this series right now, 3-2.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. The better team won last night because they were at home. They were younger. I mean, they're the youngest team in the NBA. People always talk about the Sixers. The Celtics are actually the youngest team in the NBA. So let's get back to the tired thing here real quickly, okay? Because
you're not going to let it go today.
No, I can understand.
You're not going to let it go.
I can understand how players are tired. And everybody's tired at this point. And we'll get into what a discrepancy that is between how we look at the word tired when we talk about LeBron James or when we look at the word tired talking about any other team, including a team that may have 4 of the top 20 players in the NBA.
Hey everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for the Golic Wingo podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org number 3030.
To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Chris Canty in for Mike Golic here. And Chris, you know, maybe we should have thought about this and talked to you about it because it's coming up, ladies and gentlemen, and your time to join us is running out for
Golic and Wingo Leadership Retreat.
Guys, we're getting to the end of your chance, okay? Tomorrow is the last day for you to join me, Mike Golic Jr., and Stu Gatz, maybe, at the Golic and Wingo Offsite All Hands Town Hall Leadership Retreat Strategy Session Golf Tournament. Hashtag corporate scam just to play golf. We are hosting our first ever annual leadership retreat, and you can be a part of it. We're taking 4 winners, and those 4 winners each get to pick 2 friends that will come with them to play with us at the Pinehurst Resort. We're playing Pinehurst number 2, one of the great courses in the history of America, arguably the greatest. A championship course, a Donald Ross design. We're also going to play the Cradle, which is their 9-hole par 3 course. It's absolutely fantastic. Here's what you get if you come along on this retreat. You get airfare, you get premium accommodations, you get meals, you get swag, and you get all that golf stuff that we're talking about. But you got one shot, Chris, one shot to enter, and you got to do it on Twitter. You must be following at Golic and Wingo. You've got to tag at Golic and Wingo in the tweet. You've got to use the hashtag Golf with GW Contest and send us your best entry. It can be just text. It can be a picture. It can be video. All I'm saying is it better be good because the level of responses we've got and the artistic and thematic impressions that have come with it.
Good word usage.
Thank you very much. Have become absolutely phenomenal. Again, the dates are June 21st through the 23rd. We're going to get down there. We'll have a lot of fun. We might crack open a cold beverage. Actually, that's not true. We're going to crack open a lot of cold beverage.
We get it. You're going to have a blast golfing, but after, let's get the team building back up. Maybe a little ropes course.
Yeah, sure. The ropes course will be us we're tying our shoes. That'll be the ropes course, tying our shoes. We're using
I don't know how you play a round of golf without having swing lube.
There you go.
You got to have swing lube.
Yeah, a little swing oil. I've got to get things going. So, Chris, maybe you should put an entry in from your Twitter account.
I was about to ask you, is that how I have to get in on this trip?
Yeah, I got that.
You don't have enough weight around here to get me a part of that?
Well, see, here's the problem. We got people weighing in left and right. Jason Fitz of Spain and Fitz has sent in 5 videos trying to get in. He now stinks of desperation. It's a little embarrassing for him. So we're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, but that's Jason Fitz.
Yeah.
Trey, I'm supposed to be your guy.
You are my guy.
Exactly. So when the big guy is not in this chair, I'm the guy that you bring in.
That's true.
Yeah, you go to the bullpen, you call Chris Canty out of ESPN New York.
We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out. You're in. Maybe Stu Gatz is out. We'll do it that way. Stu Gatz is out and Chris Canty's in. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, that's Straight Talk, and it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. So let's dive into Mr. Biorhythms and Mr. Disengagement, LeBron James. Look, it's pretty clear that he was tired.
Yeah.
Tyronn Lue even said it after the game.
Did LeBron look tired to you? And especially, did you think he looked tired at all tonight?
He looked a little tired to me, yes. No concerns. You got to be ready to play now. No concerns.
No concerns, but people are concerned. I mean, he's in his 15th season. He's carrying 4 adult humans on his back every time he's on the floor.
Yep.
I get it. Can't have the turnovers. Can't do that. But it's an amazing differential between how we look at LeBron James, who's tired, as opposed to other people. I thought Paul Pierce, a former Finals NBA MVP, summed this up best about what was going on with LeBron as opposed to what was going on with the Celtics, which we'll get into in a minute. But here was Paul Pierce.
Well, I didn't see the defensive energy I saw
he put forth in Game 4, where he was giving you blocks and steals and getting out in the open court, finishing layups. It just looks like he's mentally tired. He's tired of seeing his supporting cast not show up for him. You know, that can wear on you over time when you're just constantly knowing you have to go out there and score 40 points, get 12 assists in order for your team to have a win. It just seems like it's getting to him mentally, and the Celtics are wearing him down because they have so many weapons, so many different guys who can play well, and I think it looks like it was getting to him.
And I think that's the best assessment of what happened last night. When you know that you have to score and the rest of the starters won't match your point total, man, that will wear you down. There's no way around that.
Not to mention, you're probably the only guy that's bringing energy because the rest of your team, they're role players. And when you don't have the energy of the home crowd behind you, and you realize that you have to be on the floor for 40-plus minutes, that you have to score 30-plus points, and you basically have to go for a triple-double in order for your team to be competitive in a game, that can wear on a player throughout the course of a postseason, and that's exactly what's happened. You saw that it was a tough out for the Indiana Pacers in that first postseason series, and then the Toronto Raptors, they disposed of them, but that's just because they have the mental edge on that team.
Correct.
That's a whole nother story. But you realize going up against what is one of the most efficient teams on the defensive side of the court in the NBA, if not the most efficient team in the Boston Celtics, you realize that LeBron James was going to have his work cut out for him. And ultimately, they weren't going to win every game in this series. Boston is undefeated at home. So it's a really good team, and LeBron James is struggling a little bit to carry this supporting cast to a situation where they can be in the NBA Finals again. That's where they're at.
See, this is why you're the best, okay? We're not being LeBron James apologists here. We're trying to look at it honestly. We're trying to look at it realistically. What you just said is absolutely right. The Boston Celtics are the better team. They're the better team, and they were playing at home where they have not lost yet in this postseason. And somehow we sort of glance over that and talk about LeBron James's body language. And then that becomes the focal point, and that can't happen. Really? Well, here's the Warriors head coach Steve Kerr talking about his team and how they ran out of gas.
I felt like in the fourth quarter, we just ran out of gas. We scored 12 points. Tried to buy a little bit of rest for our guys, but they just outplayed us in the fourth, and they earned it.
So we can get into the discussion a little bit later about that series, but let's sum it up real quickly. Yeah, four of the best players in the NBA ran out of gas. Well, it happens. We got to get back going. The best player in the NBA, who's carrying 4 adult humans on his back every day, he can't get tired. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying he didn't play a great game, because he didn't play a great game. He played okay. He had too many turnovers. He wasn't playing as well defensively as he should have. But let's look at it realistically. Let's not make up things to explain why this happened. Let's dive into the actual things that happened, including the other team being better, the other team being at home, the other team undefeated at home, and his teammates not showing up. Once again, 5th time this playoff run, he has outscored the rest of the Cleveland Cavs starters. If you don't think that's the reason, then you're not watching the game.
I'm a one-trick pony. Literally. I show up at kids' parties and act cute. That's pretty much it. So excuse me for being bitter. When Geico says not only could we save you money on car insurance, but we do more. Like give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or even via our award-winning mobile app. Well, ooh la la. Aren't they multi-talented? Hey, I said organic carrots.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
No, I didn't think Notre Dame should have been in. And
for 75 years, Mike Golic has aged in that seat. And you're going to keep Notre Dame out of the tournament.
Yeah, I don't have a problem.
I'm surprised that seat didn't start spinning around and flying out of his room.
I don't have a problem with that. He ain't here right now. He's in South Africa.
It's Golic and Wingo.
That, of course, when Chris Canty was here with Dan Dockich and everybody during our NCAA tournament coverage, and you had a lot of fun with that.
Oh, of course, man. And Dan's the best, man.
He is.
That guy is crazy.
What do you got there?
I got some SportsCenter, man. SportsCenter is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Straight Talk Wireless, let's get that right. To win in basketball, you got to play great coverage. And Straight Talk Wireless, you know you're going to get great coverage because they use the exact same 4G LTE towers as the big carriers, but for a lot less. Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart. Refer to terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
All right, as we continue Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, we're doing a deep dive into what happened last night in Game 5 between the Celtics and the Cavaliers. And the conversation seems to, as it always does, and I understand because he's a superstar, he's the best player in the sport. He should have won the MVP. He's not going to. I think James Harden's probably going to do it. but everyone's always focusing on LeBron James. But are we making a giant mistake by not focusing on what the Boston Celtics were able to do last night? So we'll always find ways to parse LeBron, slice through the thinnest of thins to get everything through him and what we think about he did or didn't do. But at the end of the day, the better team won last night. The better team was playing at home, and the better team won. And that says a lot about where this Boston Celtics team is right now.
Yeah, and I don't think you can understate how important Brad Stevens has been in this situation. Like, everybody wants to talk about how he's one of the best coaches in the NBA, and rightfully so, but think about the job that he's done in terms of having a team without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, the guys that were supposed to be your superstars, not having them throughout the season in your lineup, and then being able to have this team in a position where you have players like Jason Tatum be able to give you the performance that he did last night, Jaylen Brown being able to step up. Those guys' timelines have been expedited because there's a need to have players like that be difference makers. We recognize that the talent was there, but they didn't have the requisite experience that we thought that it takes to be successful, especially at this time of the year when you start talking about championship basketball. But the fact that he's helped those guys along, and then you're getting the hustle plays from players like Marcus Smart and Marcus Morris and Al Horford, I think that's the difference. When you start talking about collectively Brad Stevens making sure the pieces are in place and putting those guys in situations where they can have success, I think that's the difference, especially in a conference final situation. So you got to give credit to Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics. We know that they've been great all year at home. We know that they've been great defensively all year, but it's starting to show, especially the job that they've been able to do collectively as a team against the best player in the world, LeBron James.
And the thing that really impresses me about the Celtics is that they find different ways for different guys to shine. There have been times in this playoff run where Terry Rozier has been the best player. Well, Terry was 3 of 15 last night. He only scored 8 points. But then you look at Jason Tatum. Now, Jason Tatum is one of the finalists for the Rookie of the Year. He's not going to win it. It's going to be the Donovan Mitchell or Ben Simmons. But if they revoted and played and counted the postseason, which I understand why you don't, Jason Tatum will win that award going away. I mean, he was clutch last night. He made almost 50% of his shots from the floor, 7 of 8 from the line. He led them in scoring at 24 points, and most impressively, he was plus 19 as well. I mean, this kid, and I mean a kid in every way, shape, or form, is proving to be the guy that I think Kyrie Irving was supposed to be for this Boston Celtics team, right? I mean, I understand that Kyrie is always going to be looked at a higher level, but the way that Jason Tatum has embraced his role as a youngster, I've got to be the guy now that sort of leads this thing going forward. It's pretty impressive. And Jason Tatum himself talked about stepping up in Game 5.
I mean, I just enjoy, playing in the big moments, in the big games. I think that's, when I have the most fun, when things are on the line. And, a lot of guys stepped up tonight. And, I can't say it enough. We're one win away from going to the finals, especially after everything we've been through.
After everything they've been through, Gordon Hayward goes out Game 1 against Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Kyrie Irving has played great for them, and then sort of surprisingly had to have that surgery with the knee. He's gonna miss the entire postseason.
He's basically been
run.
MIA since the second half of the season.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I understand in the pop culture prism that we live in, it's always about, hey, this guy, LeBron James, what did he do? But I really think if we're honest with ourselves, it's a lot more about what the Boston Celtics did as opposed to what LeBron James didn't do last night.
No, 100%. And when you look at the Boston Celtics, they didn't shoot well from the field last night, but they did shoot well from three, especially in the first half. They had 9 3-point makes, and I think that created an opportunity for them in the second half to be more aggressive, try to drive the ball into the paint, create other opportunities, being able to get open looks for other guys. So when you look at the difference makers offensively for that team, it starts with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and those two guys stepping up in the way that they have throughout the postseason ultimately is what makes the difference on the offensive side of the court for the Boston Celtics. So you got to give them their props. But again, I go back to Brad Stevens, making sure that those guys had the opportunity, making sure that those guys are in place and they play a specific style of basketball that is complementary of the skill sets that those two particular players bring to the table.
Right. And again, that's 10 straight home wins in this single postseason for the Boston Celtics. I believe that's the most ever in one postseason to win 10 straight home games. It's been absolutely amazing. Of course, on the other side of that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of people thought they would walk in with that young Boston squad and maybe say, hey, we're not afraid of the moment, especially LeBron James. It didn't work out that way, and I thought Brian Windhorst, our fine ESPN NBA insider, broke it down perhaps the best as to what happened with LeBron James and the Cavs last night.
The Cavs locker room after Game 5 was as quiet as it's been all season, and that's because they knew they missed a huge opportunity in this one. Holding the Celtics to just 36% shooting, having an opportunity to win on this floor, and not being able to execute enough to get it done. LeBron James was a little bit low energy, and he admitted he had moments where he felt tired, but he got no support from most of his teammates, especially the starters. Ty Lue admitted he lost track of his rotation and forgot to play Kyle Korver enough. All in all, not the type of performance from the Cavs that they were looking for.
In a game that they thought they might be able to sneak and then close it out in Game 6 in Cleveland. Now, of course, they have to win to force a Game 7, which I think they will.
Yes.
I think they absolutely will win on their home floor and force a Game 7. But again, listen to everything that Brian said. Yes, LeBron admitted he was a little tired. That's okay. I mean, we just said that that the Warriors, who have 4 of the top 20 players in the NBA, all 4 of them got tired, and we're like, well, they'll find a way to move on. But one guy carrying 4 adults on his back can't get tired. And then, what did he say? He got nothing from the rest of that supporting cast. Again, this is the 5th time in this postseason where LeBron James has outscored the other 4 starters for the Cleveland Cavaliers. That can't be a thing if you want to try and win an NBA championship.
No, it's going to take an entire team to do so, and that's what the Boston Celtics are, and it's clear that the Cleveland Cavaliers are not. But when they play at home, the role players for the Cleveland Cavaliers are much better, and that's going to be the difference. So, yeah, I think this series will hold serve. I think that the Cleveland Cavaliers will go in Game 6 and take care of business, and ultimately it'll come down to a Game 7. And in a Game 7 situation, as great as the Boston Celtics have been throughout the postseason, I'm not going to bet against the best player in the world, LeBron James.
That's the interesting thing. But if somehow the Celtics do pull this off and get to the NBA Finals without Kyrie, without Gordon Hayward, I think we're looking. Anyway, everyone talks about the Sixers because they have Simmons and Joel Embiid, and we'll find out what Markelle Fultz is going to be. This may be the team that may be dominating this conference for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, don't you think?
I agree. Absent LeBron James deciding to join the Philadelphia 76ers, yes, that would be the situation. I'm looking at the Boston Celtics as the only team in the NBA that really realistically has a chance to compete against the teams coming out of the West, and we're talking about the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, if only there was something good for Boston sports fans to be celebrating. Oh, wait, it's been an unbelievable run for that city over the last few years.
And this Rob Gronkowski contract thing sounds like it's getting closer to being worked out.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. So if this team somehow, some way makes it to the finals, you have to be looking at yourself in the Eastern Conference going, damn, we're going to have to deal with these guys for a long time. But again, they still got to win one more game to figure that out, and the next game's going to be in Cleveland. I think we both agree that game may go the way of the Cavaliers, and then we'll see what happens with a Game 7 in Boston with the youngest team in the NBA. All right, you won't believe this, but coming up next, we'll tell you what my co-host today, Chris Canty, has in common with Warren Beatty. Don't go down that road. We'll explain exactly what it is when we come back. It's Golic and Wingo with Chris Canty on a Thursday morning.
To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true.
But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com. Yeah, we got a lot going on a Thursday morning, and we're glad you're with us. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Chris Canty in for Mike Golic, Trey Wingo here. We got a lot to get to, man. We got the Celtics 1 game away from the NBA Finals. Got a huge Game 5 tonight, Chris, in the Western Conference between Golden State and Houston. We'll see if the Rockets can defend home court or will Golden State respond after laying an egg when they were tired in the fourth quarter in that loss in Game 4 when they only scored 12 points. We have the Stanley Cup Finals set. It's an unbelievable matchup on so many levels, unprecedented on so many levels. And we got a lot to dive into what happened at the NFL owners' meetings yesterday. Clearly, we got a lot of meat on the bone today is what we're saying.
Yeah, we got a lot to get to today. But, listen, this is why we love sports, to have the opportunity to talk about these different topics. And the sports world is buzzing right now, so let's get into it.
Let's do it. Golic and Wingo presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Get your quote at Progressive.com today. And being Progressive is talking about what's trending. And that would be the Washington Capitals, advancing to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 1998 by beating the Lightning 4-0. And you want to talk about a superstar setting the tone early? Alex Ovechkin opened the scoring with just over a minute gone in the first period. Chris, that was the earliest goal to open a playoff game in his entire career.
Yeah, and you know what? Everybody thought that last year's Caps team was going to be the best chance for Ovi to get to a Stanley Cup Finals. Didn't work out, obviously, but this year, being able to finally get over that hump, being able to get past the teams that they had to go through and ultimately end up in the Stanley Cup Finals playing against the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's safe to say in terms of the storyline and the markets that are going to be involved with this Stanley Cup Finals, Gary Bettman and the National Hockey League got exactly what they were looking for.
Listen, they have to be very happy because the Golden Knights are such an unbelievable story. And again, yes, they are the second expansion team ever to make it to the finals, but there's a huge asterisk next to the last team to do it, which was the 1967-68 St. Louis Blues, because they played in the Western Conference, and that year every team in the Western Conference was an expansion team. So one of them was going to make it. They had to make it. Not taking anything away from that Blues team, but this is a different set of circumstances with the way this Golden Knights team has made it there. And again, the Caps lost both of their regular season meetings to Las Vegas. As for Ovechkin, he has 339 more regular season goals in his career than the Golden Knights franchise has. That is the largest gap between a player and an opposing team entering a Stanley Cup final in NHL history, per the Allied Sports Bureau. And of course it is, because it's one of the best goal scorers in the history of the game against a team that didn't exist prior to this year, so you can understand why that stat plays out the way it does. In the NBA, with the Western Conference Finals tied at 2, the Warriors face the Rockets in Houston at 8 o'clock tonight on ESPN Radio. But again, every single game throughout the entire rest of the NBA playoffs will be on ESPN Radio. Golden State looks to avoid back-to-back postseason losses, Chris, for the first time since the 2016 NBA Finals.
Will the real Golden State Warriors please stand up? It just feels like
you went Slim Shady on
I
us.
had
I
to,
love
man.
it.
But here's the problem that I have with this team. Throughout the regular season and even in the postseason, at times this team seems disinterested or not as engaged. Everybody wants to talk about LeBron James not being engaged.
Engagement.
But I think it's clear that the Golden State Warriors look at it as a light switch that they flip on and off as they so choose.
Yes.
And ultimately, when you start playing against a team that was the best team in the NBA and won 65 games in the regular season, you realize that you have to play more consistently. And that's what caught up with them in Game 4. But as we've seen in the past, this Golden State Warriors team is going to play best when they're forced to.
Yeah.
And this team with the Houston Rockets is just talented enough to force the best out of the Golden State Warriors. And that's what I anticipate we see tonight in Game 5 down in the Toyota Center.
I am so glad, Chris Canty, that you brought that up, because we had this sound from Michael Wilbon, who does a great job with us on PTI and also covers the NBA and is a huge Cubs fan and everything, talking about the Golden State Warriors. And he said the Golden State Warriors are kind of like that team that thinks they're the smartest kid in the class and they can fool around and get it done when they want to. And we somehow accept that. It's like, oh, that's okay because, they're so good. They have all this. They don't have to be engaged all the time. But when LeBron sometimes is perceived as not being the most hyper-focused human in the history of carbon-based life forms, it's a travesty of justice. It is amazing how differently we look at things based on what our perceptions are of who's doing it.
We look at LeBron James like a superhero.
Yeah.
We look at the Golden State Warriors as a historically great team.
Correct.
So, I guess when you start talking about why these teams or why these players aren't as consistent as they want. LeBron James is one of the most consistent players in the NBA. You know what he's going to bring in terms of effort every single night. So when people say that LeBron James isn't giving max effort, LeBron James is out there every single night doing everything that he possibly can to help his team win. It's just that the supporting cast doesn't always come to play. Now, if you want to make the argument that LeBron James is in part responsible for said supporting cast,
fine.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But saying that LeBron James isn't giving effort, that's absolutely ridiculous.
I disagree with that completely. You can say he shouldn't have turned the ball over 6 times. You're 100% right. He maybe should have hit more shots. You're absolutely right. I don't want to hear it about engagement or interest. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Fair argument with the Golden State Warriors, though.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine for them to do it, yeah. Oh, my gosh. All right, Nashville, get ready because we coming. The National Football League Draft officially coming to Nashville in 2019, bringing to fruition what the city's top tourism executive called the biggest media event ever to be recruited here. NFL owners on Wednesday approved Nashville as the host city for the event that has evolved from it used to be done in a hotel room in New York at the Sheraton Hotel. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time. I don't remember. I was told this story. The first
I was
time,
wondering if you were there on draft coverage.
Thank you so much, Chris Perry. I was told this story the first time ESPN asked the NFL to host the draft. They wanted to televise the draft. The NFL's response was, "Why would you do that?" And look what this thing has become. It's become an unbelievable show.
It's must-see TV. It's a spectacle, and it carries the hopes and dreams of every single franchise. It gives every NFL fan base an opportunity to feel optimism about its team's fortunes moving forward to the NFL regular season. So the NFL has done a good job of trying to keep fan bases engaged throughout the calendar year, and the draft, of course, is the highlight for the NFL offseason.
Now, look, we'll get into a minute what the NFL hasn't done right, and it has not done it right in a spectacular way, something else that came out of these meetings. But the NFL has done a great job in this sense. They have found a way to make things that would be ordinarily mundane into an event, a star-studded affair. For example, the Hall of Fame was basically just guys reading speeches. They now have a concert attached to that. That is the kickoff, basically, to start the full NFL playing part of the year with the Hall of Fame game and everything else. It's become an event. The season opener on Thursday night. They have concerts before that to get people hyped and all that kind of stuff. It's a standalone event on a Thursday. And the way they've made the draft, which, again, the draft is just a reading of chronological names.
That's it.
That's all it is. It has become one of the wildest things you could ever be a part of. Last month in Dallas, I ran into 2 fine gentlemen from Glasgow, Scotland, who had flown in just to participate and be a part of the NFL draft.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
And which means there's a lot of pressure on people involved in the draft. And you have to handle things the right way. Which leads me to you, my guy, Chris Canty. You were on before the draft, and you told us that, hey, you're going to announce the Giants' 3rd-round pick in Dallas. We were talking about whether or not the Cowboys should boo you or not boo you, and what was going to happen because you started out as a Cowboy, then went to the Giants, won a Super Bowl, and then finished up with the Ravens. So you got to make the announcement of the 3rd-round pick of the New York Giants, and here's how that went down.
With the 66th pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the New York Football Giants select Lorenzo Carter, linebacker, Clemson.
So you said Lorenzo
Did you hear the slight hesitation?
We call that a pregnant pause.
Okay.
Now, would you like to explain to people? Because as soon as you said that, I did take my swings.
Yeah, you proceeded to throw me under the bus.
I did take my swings. And then, kids, learn from me. Hold off, get all the information, and then maybe rethink. Learn from my mistake. Because please, Chris, allude to us what happened.
So, first of all, I was doing the ESPN radio draft coverage with Bill Polian and Dari and Ian Fitzsimmons. And we were having a discussion, talking about the draft picks that were still on the board for the second day. And Lorenzo Carter's name came up, and obviously he's a linebacker from Georgia.
Great linebacker.
So when the NFL staffers came to get me to come announce the Giants' 3rd-round pick, I went down there. We all went out on the stage as the Walter Payton Men of the Year for our respective teams in the 3rd round. And then the Giants were picking at the top of the 3rd round. Right. So the NFL staffer hands me the card, and it says Lorenzo Carter, linebacker, Clemson. And I talked to the staffer and I say, well, you know, Lorenzo Carter went to Georgia. And the staffer politely asked me to read the card as it was written. So they set me up for failure because they asked me to go out there and just follow instructions rather than doing the right thing and going out there and announcing Lorenzo Carter, the card says Clemson, but he really went to Georgia.
So, but you knew he went to Georgia.
I knew he went to Georgia.
So I can't completely let you off the hook.
The thing that I hate about the whole situation, Trey, is that you only have one time to hear your name called at the draft.
Yes.
And so the moment was kind of taken away a little bit for Lorenzo Carter. So my bad, Lorenzo Carter. But I'm just telling you exactly what happened in that situation. But they gave me a mulligan. I was able to announce B.J. Hill a couple of picks later.
And it went like this.
They decided to give me a mulligan with the 69th pick in the 2018 NFL Draft. Your New York Football Giants select B.J. Hill, defensive tackle, NC State.
All right, so you nailed that one.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what we've learned in this scenario is that you were like the 2017 Oscars, right? They gave you the wrong card.
They gave me the wrong card.
Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway were up there, and they announced La La Land as the best picture. Then it became Moonlight, and then the cinephile expert that we have, Adnan Verk, you were basically this.
Oh, my goodness. Warren Beatty apparently read the wrong name. This is incredible. Moonlight won Best Picture.
Moonlight won Best Picture.
Yeah, it was a Steve Harvey-esque moment for me.
I have to apologize.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, listen, it's all good. You know, it was fun for laughs, and the guys on my show down at 98.7, Rick DiPietro and Dave Rothenberg, have a good laugh of it. Of course, it's a drop now for our show, but you know what? It was an awesome opportunity to be able to announce the draft pick for one of your former teams. I looked at it as an honor and a privilege, and I was glad to be a part of the NFL draft.
Okay. So that's what happened at the draft, which we really, really like. Golic and Wingo here with you on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Chris Canty in for Mike Golic today. So that's good news, the way they handled the draft. Then there's the other thing that came out of the NFL owners' meetings yesterday, which was an update on the national anthem policy. And I want to preface this by saying there was nothing the NFL could have done yesterday that would have been a win for them. There's literally nothing, because no matter what they did, they were going to get criticized. I think that's by some faction, correct?
Yes, they were going to be criticized by someone, but I look at it in terms of the NFL doing the right things by the players.
Yes, we'll get into that. So the NFL, because of the protests and then the response to all the players when President Trump called them sons of you-know-whats, which, quite frankly, I think if anybody was called something like that, they would have responded in kind the way the players did. They decided to make a change to the policy. And basically the policy is this. No one has to be on the field for the national anthem, which, by the way, it was when you were playing in 2009. Before 2009, none of the players were on the field.
No, in 2005 when I was drafted, we weren't on the field for the national anthem. We came out afterward.
Again, I think people forget that part of the equation. They came out afterwards. So now the policy is very simple as we sound off on the NFL's new national anthem policy. Brought to you by ADT. Considering home security, consider this. For 140 years, ADT has helped stop more crime than any other home security company. Visit ADT.com today. So the policy simply states this. No one has to be on the field for the national anthem. You have the right to stay in the locker room. However, if you are on the field, you must stand respectfully for the national anthem. And any player or personnel that stands, that is on the field for the national anthem and doesn't stand will be subjected to a fine by the NFL, and the team will pay that fine. So that's the policy as it's stated now. Here's Roger Goodell trying to sort of sum up why they got to this conclusion that they did.
Who's the arbiter of respect for the flag? What would be considered disrespect for the flag and the anthem? And why would the league and the owners kind of willingly attempt to police something that is subjective like this?
Well, I think the general public has a very strong view of what respect for the flag is in that moment. We have language in our policy that talks about that, standing at attention with hats off and focused. And I think the general arbiter will be the clubs and the league, and we'll work with our players and get their viewpoint also.
That last part...
You didn't work with your players.
Yeah, to be clear... the NFL players and the NFLPA were not contacted in any way, shape, and form about an issue that is near and dear to the players. The NFL came out and said, well, we've come to this compromise. Compromise with who? Compromise with what? The compromise was among owners who some wanted really strict penalties and harsh penalties. Some wanted some penalties, and some, like the Jets chairman, Chris Johnson, wanted no penalties whatsoever. So when you're talking about compromise, you're not compromising with the people who had the issue that they wanted to be talked about and dealt with. You're talking about compromising among yourselves. And we're supposed to be partners in this between the players and the owners, and there was none of that. Zero.
You know what it is, Trey? It comes off as incredibly insensitive and tone deaf from the NFL owners in terms of what their players actually care about and the message that was behind the protest during the national anthem. This in no way, shape, or form was designed to be disrespectful to the military. It was a vehicle that Colin Kaepernick and others used to get across the message about criminal justice reform, arrest-related deaths, and police brutality. And, oh, by the way, it's still a relevant message after we see what happened to the Milwaukee Bucks player Sterling Brown and the video that was released yesterday.
Correct.
So just the timing of that, it just brings to light the urgency that the players are approaching this issue with. And with the unique dynamic in professional sports where the player is also the product, you would think that the owners would care more about something that the players are so passionate about. What happened after the situation where President Trump had what he had to say in Alabama in September when the owners locked arms with the players and went out in a show of solidarity, confirming the players' right to protest with the collective bargaining agreement and our Constitution? Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
What happened to that support for the owners? What happened to that part? I don't understand how in less than a calendar year we can get to a point where the owners are essentially acquiescing to exactly what our president wanted them to do, which is enacted policy that forced the players to stand and take away their voice and their opportunity to be the messengers for communities and for other individuals that are marginalized in our country. That's what I don't understand. That's what I don't appreciate.
Yeah, look, I think they threw gas on a fire that had almost been doused with this. They found a way to keep it relevant, keep it in the news, and have everybody talking about it. Because let's be clear about one thing. They felt like the players have the option to do what they want, but they're making the players into targets now. Because you know what's going to happen week 1 of the NFL season. Every beat writer or every person that covers a certain team, whether it's for television, radio, whatever, is going to take stock. They're going to go down the list and see what players are standing outside for the national anthem and what players are inside. And those players that are inside, they're going to go stick a microphone or a recorder or a television camera in their face and say, why did you do what you did? So essentially what the NFL has found a way to do is to take something that had quite frankly diminished. What was the percentage of players that absolutely in any way, shape, or form protested in the last couple weeks of the season? Minimal, right?
Minimal.
Guess what's going to happen now? We've already heard this from a lot of people. Really? You're going to do this to us now? Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to make my stand now by going in there because you put it where we now have a target on our back.
You're going to see exactly what happened on September 24th last year, which is when the majority of the players in the league came out and they took a stance during the national anthem. And that's the thing that's frustrating. But ultimately, the NFL, they're the ones that opened the door for this back in 2009.
Yes.
Because they used the national anthem to further their agenda, which just so happens to be their bottom line, which laid the path for them to make tens of millions of dollars from the Department of Defense in an attempt to use their entertainment product as a promotional vehicle for our military. That's exactly what happened.
Correct.
The NFL owners didn't ask the players to stand on the sideline before the game during the anthem out of patriotism. They asked so they can make money.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and that came under scrutiny in 2015.
So it's okay for the NFL owners to use the national anthem to further their agenda, but when an actual player does it, that's when we have a problem. And we're going to pass on the accountability for an unintended consequence based on a decision that we made. We're going to pass that on to the players.
And I think that one thing that needs to come across clear here, everybody respects what the military is and respects the flag. There's no question about that. The question is, how do you do that in a way that people can understand what's going on? And to your point about profitability, I thought this tweet from Chris Long for the Eagles was really great yesterday. It said, this is a fear of a diminished bottom line. It's also a fear of a president turning his base against a corporation. This is not patriotism. Don't get it confused. These owners don't love America more than the players demonstrating and taking real action to improve it. It also lets you, the fan, know where our league stands. Chris went on to say, I will continue to be committed to affecting change with my platform. I'm someone who always looked at the anthem as a declaration of ideals, including the right to peaceful protest. Our league continues to fall short on that issue. And we'll end this segment here with this line. This is a business, and the NFL owners have a right, as long as they are not doing anything illegal, they have a right to conduct their business the way they want to. The question then becomes, if you really want to be partners with the people that you say you're partners with, was this the most effective way to deal with this issue and continue to strengthen the partnership? the answer there seems to have fallen significantly short. And coming up this morning, we have heard from the person who has served, without question, as the catalyst for this new anthem policy, and you'll hear from that person next.
Hey everyone, Mike Golic here. Support for the Golic Wingo podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org number 3030. To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com. Well, it is certainly something that a lot of people are talking about and continuing to react to as we are here with you, Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Chris Canny and Trey Wingo in this morning, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Don't forget the NBA Western Conference Finals and every game remaining in the NBA playoffs are on ESPN Radio. Tune in for Game 5 tonight as James Harden's on the Rockets, host Kevin Durant and the Warriors. Presented by Indeed, coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. You know, we just played that rejoin with all the owners talking about what they did and what they didn't do, and I love that one bite from that one owner. I think that throughout this process, we've come much closer to our players. So close that you didn't even think to ask them about what they thought about what might be going forward with the policy that affects them directly.
That's what I don't understand about this whole thing, Trey. You unanimously decided to unilaterally impose a rule that takes away the players' rights that you confirmed that they had last year during the NFL regular season when this whole issue about kneeling during the national anthem reached its tipping point. Every owner unanimously supported the players' rights to be able to protest last year, especially after President Trump had what he had to say in Alabama that Friday before, I believe it was week 3 of the NFL regular season. And so now it's a situation in less than a calendar year, you're trying to basically implement a rule or a policy without even having a meaningful conversation with the NFLPA. Again, we start talking about collective bargaining because it's a partnership between the players and the owners. This is something that the players had the right to do under the current collective bargaining agreement. So everybody's saying that the owners, it's their product, it's their league, and they can just impose something. They're wrong. Yeah. This is not something that you can just impose without having a conversation with the players about.
By the way, that sound you heard was, I think we come closer to our players. That was Packers president, and it was Jimmy Haslam. It was Jimmy Haslam. It was Jimmy Haslam of the Browns. And again, I'm not saying he hasn't come closer to his players. I'm not saying he hasn't done that. All I'm saying is I find it odd to say that when you didn't even talk to the players in a formal way from the league's perspective about redoing a policy that is near and dear to the players who are using that as their platform. So as you alluded to, and as Chris Long alluded to in his tweet yesterday, this was all as a catalyst in response to what President Trump had to say on the campaign trail last fall about the players. And now, of course, President Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning and was asked about the NFL's new anthem policy.
Well, I think that's good. I don't think people should be staying in locker rooms, but still, I think it's good. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. And the NFL owners did the right thing if that's what they've done.
If that is the story, do you feel like you pushed this story forward and you pushed this to a conclusion?
I think the people pushed it forward. This was not me. I brought it out. I think the people pushed it forward. This country is very smart. We have very smart people. And, you know, that's something ideally could have been taken care of when it first started. It would have been a lot easier. But if they did that, they're doing the right thing.
I think there's a couple of things there that make a lot of sense. And there's a couple of things that I have real problems with, which we can get into.
Okay.
First and foremost, I think that had the NFL come up with some sort of uniform policy like the NBA had a long time ago, we wouldn't be into this gray area. I think that's a fact. I think that's a fair point because it wasn't a rule. It was in the game operations manual, and it said players should. It didn't say players will or players must, which allowed this whole thing to festoon. So I agree on that part.
Yeah.
Had the NFL come forward with a strict policy like the NBA did in the 90s in a response to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who after he converted to be a Muslim when he was Chris Jackson coming out of LSU, he would used to sit and pray during the national anthem, and then they came to a rule that you must stand. And so he stood and prayed during the national anthem, and that sort of alleviated the issue. But I think it was not as much of a problem in the NBA back then for two reasons. One, social media didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I think there's always been a sense in the NBA that whether it was current Commissioner Adam Silver or former Commissioner David Stern, that there was a true partnership on some level between the NBA and the NBA players, and they would work together on certain issues. And you mentioned what happened with Donald Sterling and the Clippers and how Adam Silver and company responded to that. I don't think that's part of the equation here with the NFL and the NFLPA and their players. I don't think they.
It's not the same relationship.
You didn't feel that way as a player, right?
No, I didn't feel that way as a player, and I know that other players didn't feel that way as well. And I guess that's a part of the problem because it doesn't feel like a true partnership. It just feels like the NFL just tries to wield whatever power it has and retroactively impose things that are in the best interest of their bottom line rather than doing what's in the best interest of the league and the best interest of the players. And that's the most disappointing part of it because the NFL is in this situation because they were thinking about their bottom line. That's why they decided to use the players as props back in 2009 in an attempt to wrap the shield in the flag and also which laid the groundwork for being able to get tens of millions of dollars from the Department of Defense in the NFL using their entertainment product as a promotional vehicle for our military. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that the NFL owners are doing this because of patriotism. They're doing this because they are alienating a segment of their fan base.
Correct.
And there are some potential sponsors that have an issue with it as well. Correct. That's what it all comes down to. So the
bottom line is the bottom line.
The bottom line is the bottom line. And I just don't think that that's the right approach, especially after what we saw last year in terms of the NFL making this an issue about the players and their rights rather than President Trump hijacking the message behind the protest during the national anthem and making it all about patriotism.
And I think as we continue here, Golic and Wingo, Chris Canny in for Mike Golic, Trey Wingo here, we have to always say this and we have to preface this. I have great respect for our military. My father served in the Air Force. My father-in-law served in the Army. My grandfather served in World War I. My nephew, who just graduated from Georgetown Law through the Veterans Program, was in the Navy. So that's not the issue. The issue is how do you show respect and how do you deal with what you perceive to be the right things to do for the national anthem. And the flag, that's been the whole part of this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a whole code of conduct for the flag, a whole thing. You can look it up on the usflag.org, things you should and should not do. And one of the things that is specifically stated in that code, the flag should never be used as wearing apparel, bedding, or drapery. So let's go back to that. The flag should never be used as wedding apparel. You can go on the NFL.com website and find pictures of certain players' uniforms with the stars and stripes where the numbers are.
Yeah.
So is that respecting the flag? Not according to the code.
Exactly.
And there was a picture that showed up last year of a guy at a Jets game, and his shirt says, "I stand for our national anthem." But it was a picture of him sitting on the flag. It was a picture of him sitting on the ground on the flag. Pretty sure the flag code of conduct says the flag should never touch the ground. And I'm pretty sure if you want to show a lot of respect for the flag, you shouldn't be sitting on it while it's sitting on the ground. So we can talk about all these things. And if you want to go down that road, we can. And the other thing we should talk about here is both the president and the vice president have now sort of involved themselves in this process. Mike Pence, the vice president, put out a tweet yesterday about the anthem policy, #winning. If that isn't the definition of cross-pollinating sports and politics, I don't know what is. So if they're allowed to do that, you cannot say to a player anymore, stick to sports.
Yeah,
because it can't be good for one side and not good for the other. That's the whole point of this country we live in. It's supposed to be about things that are good for everybody.
Exactly. That's the definition of what it means to be free. That's why we're always the country that everybody looks to in terms of being able to set the example for the rest of the world, because that's one of the things that our founding fathers absolutely got right. Being able to have the freedom of speech. And it just doesn't mean when you agree with somebody else's opinion. It's having the ability to agree and disagree. And that's really what it comes down to. So ultimately, this is not about the players being anti-America. It's actually the opposite. It's about the players recognizing that there's a problem in this country and they're willing to take a stand for it. To me, there's nothing that can be more patriotic about it. It's not about disrespecting the men and women of the military. It's about using the national anthem as a vehicle to convey a message to the America that we have an issue with people being marginalized in our communities.
And again, we'll find out how this plays out going forward, but I'm really interested to see what happens week one when you know every team is going to be taking stock, or a reporter is going to be taking stock of who's in that locker room and who's not on the field standing for the national anthem. All right, that's something that we will continue to discuss and go forward. But coming up, listen, it's a day late and a dollar short because the guy's schedule changed. I don't know. He's a rock star now. He can come and go whenever he wants. We've been chomping at the bit to get back to our favorite segment. That will be Bretymology, where we will learn phrases like champing. It's champing, not chomping at the bit. Oh, see? This is interesting.
I'm a one-trick pony, literally. I show up at kids' parties and act cute. That's pretty much it. So excuse me for being bitter. When Geico says not only could we save you money on car insurance, but we do more. Like give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or even via our award-winning mobile app. Well, ooh la la, aren't they multi-talented? Hey, I said organic carrots.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
No, I didn't think Notre Dame should have been in. And
for 75 years, Mike Golic has aged in that seat. And you're going to keep Notre Dame out of the tournament.
Yeah, I don't have a problem.
I'm surprised that seat didn't start spinning around and flying out of his room. I don't have a problem with that.
He ain't here right now. He's in South Africa.
It's Golic and Wingo.
That, of course, when Chris Canty was here with Dan Dockich and everybody during our NCAA tournament coverage, and you had a lot of fun with that.
Oh, of course, man. And Dan's the best, man.
He is.
That guy is crazy.
What do you got there?
I got some SportsCenter, man. SportsCenter is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Straight Talk Wireless, Let's get that right. To win in basketball, you got to play great coverage. And Straight Talk Wireless, you know you're going to get great coverage because they use the exact same 4G LTE towers as the big carriers, but for a lot less. Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart. Refer to terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
All right, as we continue Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, we're doing a deep dive into what happened last night in Game 5 between the Celtics and the Cavaliers. And you know, the conversation seems to, as it always does, and I understand because he's a superstar, he's the best player in the sport. He should have won the MVP. He's not going to. I think James Harden's probably going to do it. But everyone's always focusing on LeBron James. But are we making a giant mistake by not focusing on what the Boston Celtics were able to do last night? So we'll always find ways to parse LeBron, slice through the thinnest of thins to get everything through him and what we think about he did or didn't do. But at the end of the day, the better team won last night. The better team was playing at home, and the better team won. And that says a lot about where this Boston Celtics team is right now.
Yeah, and I don't think you can understate how important Brad Stevens has been in this situation. Like, everybody wants to talk about how he's one of the best coaches in the NBA, and rightfully so, but think about the job that he's done in terms of having a team without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, the guys that were supposed to be your superstars, not having them throughout the season in your lineup, and then being able to have this team in a position where you have players like Jason Tatum be able to give you the performance that he did last night, Jaylen Brown being able to step up. Those guys' timelines have been expedited because there's a need to have players like that be difference makers. We recognize that the talent was there, but they didn't have the requisite experience that we thought that it takes to be successful, especially at this time of the year when you start talking about championship basketball. But the fact that he's helped those guys along, and then you're getting the hustle plays from players like Marcus Smart and Marcus Morris and Al Horford, I think that's the difference. When you start talking about collectively Brad Stevens making sure the pieces are in place and putting those guys in situations where they can have success, I think that's the difference, especially in a conference final situation. So you got to give credit to Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics. We know that they've been great all year at home. We know that they've been great defensively all year, but it's starting to show, especially the job that they've been able to do collectively as a team against the best player in the world, LeBron James.
And the thing that really impresses me about the Celtics is that they find different ways for different guys to shine. There have been times in this playoff run where Terry Rozier has been the best player. Well, Terry was 3 of 15 last night. He only scored 8 points. But then you look at Jason Tatum. Now, Jason Tatum is one of the finalists for the Rookie of the Year. He's not going to win it. It's going to be the Donovan Mitchell or Ben Simmons. But if they revoted and played and counted the postseason, which I understand why you don't, Jason Tatum would win that award going away. I mean, he was clutch last night. He made almost 50% of his shots from the floor, 7 of 8 from the line. He led them in scoring at 24 points, and most impressively, he was plus 19 as well. I mean, this kid, and I mean a kid in every way, shape, or form, is proving to be the guy that I think Kyrie Irving was supposed to be for this Boston Celtics team, right? I mean, I understand that that Kyrie is always going to be looked at a higher level. But the way that Jason Tatum has embraced his role as a youngster, I've got to be the guy now that sort of leads this thing going forward. It's pretty impressive. And Jason Tatum himself talked about stepping up in Game 5.
I mean, I just enjoy, playing in the big moments, in the big games. I think that's, when I have the most fun, when things are on the line. And, a lot of guys stepped up tonight. And, I can't say it enough. We're one win away from going to the finals, especially after everything we've been through.
After everything they've been through, Gordon Hayward goes out Game 1 against Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Kyrie Irving has played great for them, and then sort of surprisingly had to have that surgery with the knee. He's gonna miss the entire postseason. He's
basically been
run.
MIA since the second half of the season.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I understand in the pop culture prism that we live in, it's always about, hey, this guy LeBron James, what did he do? But I really think if we're honest with ourselves, it's a lot more about what the Boston Celtics did as opposed to what LeBron James didn't do last night.
No, 100%. And when you look at the Boston Celtics, they didn't shoot well from the field last night, but they did shoot well from three, especially in the first half. They had 9 3-point makes, and I think that created an opportunity for them in the second half to be more aggressive, try to drive the ball into the paint, create other opportunities, being able to get open looks for other guys. So when you look at the difference makers offensively for that team, it starts with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and those two guys stepping up in the way that they have throughout the postseason ultimately is what makes the difference on the offensive side of the court for the Boston Celtics. So you got to give them their props. But again, I go back to Brad Stevens, making sure that those guys had the opportunity, making sure that those guys are in place and they play a specific style of basketball that is complementary of the skill sets that those two particular players bring to the table.
Right. And again, that's 10 straight home wins. In this single postseason for the Boston Celtics. I believe that's the most ever in one postseason to win 10 straight home games. It's been absolutely amazing. Of course, on the other side of that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of people thought they would walk in with that young Boston squad and maybe say, hey, we're not afraid of the moment, especially LeBron James. It didn't work out that way, and I thought Brian Windhorst, our fine ESPN NBA insider, broke it down perhaps the best as to what happened with LeBron James and the Cavs last night.
The Cavs locker room after Game 5 was as quiet as it's been all season, and that's because they knew they missed a huge opportunity in this one. Holding the Celtics to just 36% shooting, having an opportunity to win on this floor, and not being able to execute enough to get it done. LeBron James was a little bit low energy, and he admitted he had moments where he felt tired, but he got no support from most of his teammates, especially the starters. Ty Lue admitted he lost track of his rotation and forgot to play Kyle Korver enough. All in all, not the type of performance from the Cavs that they were looking for.
In a game that they thought they might be able to sneak and then close it out in Game 6 in Cleveland. Now, of course, they have to win to force a Game 7, which I think they will.
Yes.
I think they absolutely will win on their home floor and force a Game 7. But again, listen to everything that Brian said. Yes, LeBron admitted he was a little tired. That's okay. I mean, we just said that the Warriors, who have 4 of the top 20 players in the NBA, all 4 of them got tired, and we're like, well, they'll find a way to move on. But one guy carrying 4 adults on his back can't get tired. And then, what did he say? He got nothing from the rest of that supporting cast. Again, this is the fifth time in this postseason where LeBron James has outscored the other 4 starters for the Cleveland Cavaliers. That can't be a thing if you want to try and win an NBA championship.
No, it's going to take an entire team to do so, and that's what the Boston Celtics are, and it's clear that the Cleveland Cavaliers are not. But when they play at home, the role players for the Cleveland Cavaliers are much better, and that's going to be the difference. So, yeah, I think this series will hold serve. I think that the Cleveland Cavaliers will go in Game 6 and take care of business, and ultimately it'll come down to a Game 7. And in a Game 7 situation, as great as the Boston Celtics have been throughout the postseason, I'm not going to bet against the best player in the world, LeBron James.
That's the interesting thing. But if somehow the Celtics do pull this off and get to the NBA Finals without Kyrie, without Gordon Hayward, I think we're looking. Anyway, everyone talks about the Sixers because they have Simmons and Joel Embiid, and we'll find out what Markelle Fultz is going to be. This may be the team that may be dominating this conference for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, don't you think?
I agree. Absent LeBron James deciding to join the Philadelphia 76ers, yes, that would be the situation. I'm looking at the Boston Celtics as the only team in the NBA that really realistically has a chance to compete against the teams coming out of the West, and we're talking about the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, if only there was something good for Boston sports fans to be celebrating. Oh, wait, it's been an unbelievable run for that city over the last few years.
And this Rob Gronkowski contract thing sounds like it's getting closer to being worked out.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. So if this team somehow, some way makes it to the finals, you have to be looking at yourself in the Eastern Conference going, damn, we're going to have to deal with these guys for a long time. But again, they still got to win one more game to figure that out, and the next game's going to be in Cleveland. I think we both agree that game may go the way of the Cavaliers, and then we'll see what happens with a Game 7 in Boston with the youngest team in the NBA. All right, you won't believe this, but coming up next, we'll tell you what my co-host today, Chris Canty, has in common with Warren Beatty. Don't go down that road. We'll explain exactly what it is when we come back. It's Golic and Wingo with Chris Canty on a Thursday morning.